Welcome to BC Nephro. Today, outside, a little different environment. I'm actually at the estate, the Nemours estate in Wilmington, Delaware, AI DuPont. Figure perfect place to talk about introduction to acid base. I think DuPont was a chemist and made some money doing some chemistry stuff, or maybe selling gunpowder, one or the other. But in any event, introduction to acid base, how a nephrologist thinks about it. Now, for more information, link to the article at bcnephro.com, link in the description below, some links to review articles to give you more details to stew over this and get into a habitual way where it becomes automatic for you. What I'm going to talk about in this video is that there's 3 different ways to assess acid base. I'm going to talk about the way nephrologists use and some of the other ways. The third way I'm not going to even talk about, just to mention, there's something called the Stewart method, bit complicated, so skip that one for now. So really there's something called the physiologic approach and then the base excess or base deficit approach. So the physiologic approach is what nephrologists use, and the base excess approach can be used, but in my mind it's simple because it's right there in your blood gas. There's a base deficit or not a base deficit. So if there's a base deficit, there must be metabolic acidosis. But in my mind, it's overly simple, too simple to diagnose mixed acid-base disorders and to really know what's going on. So nephrologists like to use the physiologic approach, and what that means is when there's an acid-base disorder, there's an expected physiologic response. And if that physiologic response does not occur, then there's a second primary disorder. It's not that there's an overcompensating or undercompensated. There's a second primary disorder. And I'm going to tell you later why I think that's important, that approach. There's a 6-stage method to go through, listed in the article. First stage is, do the numbers make sense? If the numbers are drawn at different times, the BMP and the blood gas are drawn at different times. Sometimes you can extrapolate a venous blood gas to an arterial blood gas. The numbers may not make sense. There's a way to figure that out. Quit going through a exercise and diagnostic algorithm when the numbers aren't going to jive there. The second is to figure out, is there the primary disturbance? So you figure out the primary disturbance by figuring out, is the pH high or is the pH low? If the pH is high, there has to be a primary alkalosis. If the pH is low, then there has to be a primary acidosis because the body doesn't overcompensate pH-wise. The second, what is the emia? So once you know that there's an alkalosis, you figure out, is it an metabolic alkalosis or respiratory alkalosis? Once you find out there's an acidosis, you figure out, is it a metabolic acidosis or respiratory alkalosis? So there you have your first primary disorder. Now we're getting into mixed disorders. So the mixed disorders is, what is the physiologic response and is it appropriate? There's formulas listed in the article for all the 4 primary disorders. If there is not the appropriate physiologic response, this means there's a second primary disorder. So if it's a metabolic disorder and the respiratory response is not the expected physiologic range, or vice versa, then there's a second. So now you're diagnosed a dual disorder, 2 primary disorders, metabolic and respiratory. Now, how to get to the triple thing, the triple crown of acid base. So the triple crown of acid base, diagnosing the third disorder, you're going to look for an anion gap, and if there's an anion gap, you're going to look for the delta-delta. So the delta-delta really tells you, is the change in bicarbonate explained by the anion gap? If it is, then you didn't get the triple crown. There's only 2 things going on. If it's not, then there can be an additional metabolic alkalosis in addition to the increased anion gap metabolic acidosis, or there can be 2 metabolic acidosis going on, both an increased anion gap and a normal anion gap. Now, why is this important? I mean, trying to impress people, look smart, that's not important. Knowing stuff is important. It's good to learn and things like that. But the most important thing is to figure out what's going on with the patient. And in my mind, in my opinion, once you know there's a primary disorder going on, then you have a differential for what's causing the primary disorder. You can go through the mud piles or gold mark or whatever and come up with the differential of that. If thinking that it's just compensation and not thinking maybe like primary disorder, you may stop and not go through that exercise, and you may miss an important diagnosis going on. So that's my opinion why it's helpful in your care for your patients there with acid-based disorders. So agree, disagree, leave some comments below. Email me, brian@bcnepro.com with questions or comments or ideas for future talks. All right, until next time, have a good one.